Good evening. Welcome to episode 5 of This Week in Cause. This Week in Cause is a show dedicated to nonprofit news, the world of philanthropy, and all things in the cause world. This Week in Cause includes several features that we do on a weekly basis. Our first feature will be Headlines, where we will run through the nonprofit headlines that affect your world. Our second feature is our Celebrities and Causes segment, where this week we'll discuss Zac Efron and friends who got together to do a PSA for Stand Up for Cancer. Our third segment, and our most fun, is our Cause Watch segment, where we'll explore the Shrek Happy Meal, which is a healthy food initiative that's been launched by McDonald's to get kids to eat healthier. And last but not least, we are very honored to be joined today by best-selling author Christina Pirello of ChristinaCooks.com and the Christina Pirello Healthy Education Initiative. I'm Christina Gagne, and I am joined today by my co-host, Jonathan Harris, the managing editor of Causecast.org. Well, Jonathan, I'm glad to be back this week.
I'm glad you're back as well. We missed you last week, and I hope I was able to at least bring a little bit of verve here without you, but I'm glad you're back.
Well, we're going to jump right into it. Our first headline today has to do with the Pakistan crisis, which has been overlooked by the mainstream media. Until recently, we really haven't heard a lot about it. So Jonathan, maybe you could fill the audience in and we can discuss sort of why the media has been overlooking this crisis.
Right, and so last week was kind of, I don't want to say a tipping point yet, but it's kind of when Pakistan was finally brought into the mainstream media. And I noticed that this kind of happens a little bit often with disasters. I remember once Hurricane Katrina hit, and the 5-year anniversary of that is coming up in a few weeks. When that hit, there was a day or two when people said, oh, this isn't that bad. And then over the next few days, it kind of began to emerge what was going on. And then it was another week before people realized how awesome, not in a good way, awesome in terms of grandeur that this crisis was. And it's kind of the same way with Pakistan now. It's been several weeks now, 2 to 3 weeks since the disaster, and we're just now beginning to get from the mainstream media how bad it really is. Now they're saying 20 million people are affected. That means either displaced and are now homeless. That means they don't have adequate access to food and water or sanitation. So it's becoming, I mean, only, and I say only, I use the term loosely, 1,600 people dead. But in terms of the effect on survivors in the region, they say a fifth of the country is underwater. And I want to discuss this further, but first I wanted to show a video just so we can put a bit of a face on what's going on. So can we roll that, please?
One young girl tries to get some respite from the punishing rains. Others simply try and provide the best for their families. This is Corona Camp in Pakistan's northwest. These people came here when the flood destroyed their homes.
We are facing a lot of problems. We lost everything. And it's cold here and raining. We are in serious trouble. The government should care for us in this hard time, and they should provide a safe place for us. They should give us rations. When the food comes from the government, it is not enough for the people, because there are a lot of victims.
That conditions here are tough is beyond doubt. Everything's being used. This little boy tries desperately to dry out a box of matches. High-energy biscuits are the only real source of food. The makeshift tented village is designed to be temporary, but no one knows for sure how long these people will be here. With exhausted resources and amid public criticism, the government is battling to help. Here in Charitable, also in northwest Pakistan, the priority is to repair bridges, a vital lifeline for those affected.
So, you know, some images we haven't really seen since Katrina and since the tsunami. Also took a little while for these images to really come out in the mainstream media. I mean, this happened a few weeks ago, and for many of our viewers, might be the first time they've actually seen images of people there on the ground. So, incredible devastation. So why do you think it took so long for the media to get going on this?
From my experience, it seems as though disasters are sometimes a little more spaced out. And I think in the media cycle, we discussed on earlier shows the idea of disaster fatigue. and that people maybe are just worn out from disasters. But it is the job of journalists and mainstream media to bring light on these situations, and I think it's unfortunate. And oftentimes, especially in the last 2 years, the mainstream media likes to criticize citizen journalists. But I think citizen journalists, from some of the footage I've seen and the accounts I've seen in this situation, it's been people on the ground, whether relief workers, people who might have been in Pakistan when the disaster struck, that have been delivering the news that you can actually find online. And so I think that this highlights the case for dispersed journalism. If the mainstream media isn't going to cover it, then we do need to have other people who are willing to do so. On the other hand, we have seen media shrink. But some of the outlets that do this major disaster coverage, like CNN, they have the resources to have been over there, exposing what's going on there and giving a face to it. I believe this footage that we just showed was from Al Jazeera, correct?
Yes, Al Jazeera. So, yeah, and that's another topic entirely when people like to talk about Al Jazeera and whether they're a legitimate source for news for American audiences. But when I was doing a search for some videos that were adequately describing what was going on out there, this is the best I was able to find. There have been very few reports in the mainstream media, and 20 million people affected, and not to take anything away from, some of the other disasters, but this is probably going to end up, especially to a smaller nation like Pakistan, being more devastating to them than Katrina was to the U.S. Another thing that's come up pretty often, actually 2 points I want to make. The first is that when something like this happens, you have literally hundreds of nonprofits scrambling for donation dollars, and then we get into that nonprofit competition, which I hate so much. And when we see one organization say, well, we do better things with this money and we're working in this area of the Swat Valley where no one else is working, so you should donate to us. The second point, and this is really troubling, is there's been a huge backlash against Pakistan because this disaster happened right after the WikiLeaks documents came out that suggested that a lot of the aid money that we're giving to Pakistan, the Pakistani government has used to fund the Taliban. Two completely separate issues, giving money to nonprofit organizations that would help these individuals and aid money that we give to the Pakistani government. But a lot of people are saying, well, why should we help them? They hate us and they want to bomb us anyway, as if there's not some sort of shared humanity there.
I just think this is an example of a larger problem in covering disasters. I think the media likes to focus attention on the devastation that immediately happens, and then they move on. And I want to come back to the comment you just made about Katrina. We're coming upon the 5-year anniversary, as well as what's happening in the Gulf right now. You're not hearing anything anymore. And in fact, the media you're hearing out of the Gulf, which is, within our own borders, is that the oil's cleaned up and everything's fine and dandy. And if you actually go down there or you hear any reports from people that are there, that is certainly not the case. And so I think that we've switched from, media outlets and journalists really investigating what's happening and going back, even with Haiti. Like, we saw what happened in the beginning and we're not seeing what's happening now. And we had our guest on episode 3 who was down there telling us, like, this is what really is happening down there and these are what the people are experiencing. We're not getting that from the mainstream media. That was a huge crisis. There's no follow-up. I think that's the main point.
Yeah, but I agree and disagree on your point about the Gulf. I agree that the coverage of it has gone way down now that the well is capped and no further oil that we know of or can see on TV is flowing into the Gulf. I disagree that there's no more coverage of what's happening on the beaches. I mean, just today I saw on CNN and I heard on NPR some reports of tar balls still being washed up and some of the this is off topic, but there's this big shark digging machine that BP is trying to buy to clean up all these tar balls that sifts through and gets the sand back on the beach. And I think they're still covering it, but I agree with you that in a month or two, especially as we get closer to the November elections, that's going to go away. And Pakistan will probably go away, and Haiti will go away, and Katrina we're going to hear about for a week. We're going to hear about Katrina for a week because it's the 5-year anniversary. We're going to hear about September 11th for a few days because that's the anniversary coming up, as we do every year. But yeah, I agree with you, and because we're now so exposed to these disasters, and another topic which we won't have time to get into is the climate change and how we're only on the second big rainstorm of the monsoon season over there. So they're going to get a third big rainstorm in Pakistan. So this is far from over. We're not talking about that either, and how we might have more of a duty to help out over there than we think.
Well, I think the other thing to consider is, and I just read a book on this, is the fact that, media is sort of shifting how it relays stories. And because our attention spans have changed, we've gone from print news and reading books to now we're consuming our information over the internet. That could be why we just sort of see these like flashy images of horrible situations, and we just see like the big events that happen versus more of the in-depth coverage. And I don't know, and I don't want to use that as an excuse for mainstream media, because I don't know why we're not covering these in the same way that I remember 10 years ago. You'd get a very comprehensive view of something that was going on, or you could find a news outlet that had that comprehensive take.
Yeah, it's interesting. The more time you have, it seems like the less you can put in there. They have 24-hour news coverage, but they'd say, well, we only have 24 hours. We can't cover everything. But it seems like we have the ability to cover everything before we even had the 24-hour news networks.
Oh, exactly. Well, speaking about, ethics and in terms of how we cover things and what we give light to, our next headline has to do with the White House ethics czar. The White House ethics czar has just left to take an ambassadorship with the Czech Republic, and many organizations are now angry that this position is not going to be replaced. Most notably, the Sunlight Foundation, which is a nonprofit foundation out of Washington, D.C., has come out publicly with a statement sort of questioning why this position isn't being replaced. And I think this is just part of a larger conversation about the transparency movement. For those of you that are not aware, there is a large movement based out of D.C. and as well as at the local government level of people who want access to information with their government, and they want the government to be transparent. I think that, even in California, it's 50 miles away from here, the city of Bell got into a lot of trouble for, its bad financials and sort of how it was spending, and then citizens saw and they got really upset. I think the White House, especially when President Obama came in 2009, there was this big ethics push. We're going to clean up Washington, and we're going to make things different, and this time we have a real commitment to ethics. But then not to fill this position right away, not to make it a priority, I think that sends the wrong message to proponents of transparency, as well as to people who sort of like the curtain, that veils Congress and everyone else that works in the lobbying industry there.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting the way politics works, and it always makes me think that there are some, and maybe it's true, but I always think there's some conspiracies going on, because every president talks about cleaning things up and being transparent, and I really believed that Obama wanted to do that at first. The first day you're president, they must sit you down and tell you a bunch of stuff that makes you realize, wow, we can't do this at all. Now, I'm not saying, they tell them about an alien landing at Roswell or something, but still, the transparency that we thought we were going to see on Guantanamo, for example, we haven't. And he's backtracked on some of those things that have to do with, human rights. And I think the not filling of this position is more of a symbolic point than something that's actually going to make the transparency from the White House even worse. I think it just shows they had an ethics czar, and now they don't. Should you really need someone to tell you what's ethical and what's not? I know you need lawyers to tell you what's legal and what's not, but if you ascend to the presidency, you should know what's ethical and what's not, just the name of it.
Well, I don't agree with that, and I think the issue is that there's been a larger transparency movement that's been brewing, I would say, over the last 10 years. The emergence of the Government 2.0 movement is really founded upon this idea of open government, open data, and I think the administration, Obama, the first couple of days, there's an executive order talking about ethics and transparency. It's not a matter of, there needs to be someone there just like saying all the rules. It's just that, this administration has come in saying they're going to do things different, they're going to be committed to transparency. And to not fill this position, it is symbolic, but the message that it sends when you don't fill it is that we don't have a commitment to this, and this isn't a priority. And I think, and this isn't just the Bush administration, this is a problem that arises with several administrations. We're coming off of, the last 8 years, though, where a lot of things happened and people were confused. Our economy is in shambles, and so the fact that our government is not committed to transparency, whether financial transparency or otherwise, I just think it sends the wrong message. And there's a burgeoning movement, obviously, we're all aware of the Tea Party movement. A lot of their complaints actually have to do with, too much government and not knowing what's going on. So I just think
they certainly don't know what's going on.
Well, we won't get into politics and sort of how that plays out. But I think that a lot of people, Democrats, Republicans, whoever alike, are very concerned that they don't know what's going on. And I think that people were hoping, even if they didn't vote for Obama, that this new administration would bring more clarity to government, more openness, and we're still seeing, the same things happening.
Yeah, and I think now that we're in the age of the internet and there's so much information out there, it's interesting, the things that the Obama administration has not been transparent on are really things that aren't as politically controversial. The majority, polls get this in a weird way. The majority of Americans say they are still for the Iraq War. So it makes sense that, a presidential administration would keep information that would turn the tide on that. But honestly, Afghanistan has not been in the top 5 or 6 issues of the last year. So, I'm not a political advisor, but I don't know why you would keep so many things from the American public when you really could have just released all these documents and it would have been quiet. You release them on a Friday or something. It wouldn't need to go through a huge WikiLeaks scandal, if that makes sense.
And I think that, I think we should definitely dedicate a show in the future to Gov 2.0, and I think the WikiLeaks situation is fascinating, for multiple reasons. But I think that, I hope this isn't a knock against the transparency movement in terms of them not filling this position, and I do want to highlight the wonderful work of organizations like the Sunlight Foundation. They have had the capacity to, and there's the Sunlight Foundation website, this group particularly has captured an audience that normally isn't involved in politics, technologists. And, Sunlight Labs, for example, you're getting all these data geeks and programmers doing these amazing open government projects. And so I just want to highlight their work, and I'm hoping that the administration recognizes that this movement isn't going away. Gov 2.0, there's a Gov 2.0 summit in DC coming up. This is not going anywhere. So if they're just not going to fill the position, there might be a political push to make sure that position is filled. So. Well,
maybe you'll be available?
Maybe I will be available. I might just be available.
Probably won't pay that well.
Yeah.
Okay, so our next headline, our last headline for today, is something we saw in the Chronicle of Philanthropy, and we've got it right here. It says, nation's 3rd largest charity sees revival is giving. First paragraph, more signs that giving is recovering from the downturn. Fidelity Charitable Gift Fund on Wednesday reported that it raised 67% more in the first 6 months of the year than it did in 2009. Donors provided $457 million so far this year. There's a typo. It says so far this year. So nobody's perfect. The point here is that everyone thinks, people are confused because we're thinking maybe there's going to be a double dip of the recession, but this article would seem to indicate that charitable donations are going to be going up. As you pointed out to me before the show, and correct me if I'm wrong, the last 4 quarters of 2009, the 4 quarters of 2009, they were all down. Charitable donations were going down. This would seem to indicate they're going up, but I think it's going to be only the largest organizations like Fidelity Charitable Gift Fund, United Way, Feeding America that are really going to be pulling through the most. And I think local charities are going to see trouble for years to come.
I think some of these studies, these studies fail to highlight the scope of charitable giving. There are individual online donations. There are family trusts that are set up to fund charities. And the problem is that individual donations are down. We saw this donor revolution with actually the Obama campaign and even with Haiti. We saw the text donation revolution in terms of how that can work so productively. In this instance, we don't know what nonprofits were surveyed. We don't know what they're reporting. Sometimes nonprofits wouldn't want to report perhaps that they're having their donations go down because it might look like, oh, well, are they not doing something? Is something else wrong? Just because people, and I find this, as a nonprofit attorney interesting, people shop to donate. And the $5 donor doesn't, but the $100, the $250 donor will really find out, is this a legitimate charity? Like, what are they doing with their money? What is their programming budget? And so, studies like this, I'm glad that certain, organizations are seeing a boon and an increase in funding, but there's many others who are not. And so I think that, in terms of people who are thinking of donating even a modest part of their income to charities, they need to recognize that giving was down last year. Then on the other hand, when times are tough, people are more generous. So...
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to attribute it to because, individual donations go a long way, but a giant chunk of what some of these nonprofit organizations earn are from the big donors and the big corporations. I don't know, and they certainly wouldn't publicize this if big corporations are giving less than they were a few years ago. I mean, as we research, there are tons of, there are tons of cause campaigns that corporations are doing. But maybe that's down in recent years. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I haven't seen numbers for the end of 2009 or 2010. I just haven't had time to read any of those reports. But I know that, in terms of people I've worked with and trying to get charitable donations, they've had a tougher time acquiring corporate donations or going through the corporate philanthropy programs. And unfortunately, when times are tough, corporations going to make cutbacks, it's probably their corporate philanthropy. That's very unfortunate because that's really what goes right back into the community and affects the change. So hopefully this report is correct and things are back up on the rise. And I think we all hope that the economy is actually, on the rebound and we're not going to have that double dip that you just spoke of. I hope so.
Are you optimistic?
I don't know. If there's one thing that I never did spend time studying, it was economics. And so I don't know. And from everything I've read and been exposed to the last 2 years, I don't know what to expect. I don't think anyone has a handle on how large this crisis was.
Yeah, I didn't study it either. I can't tell you if there'll be a double dip. I can tell you if there's going to be a double rainbow. That's about it.
Okay.
Not amused?
Well,
okay.
that's very that's
Check
very
that one off. Thank you. That's it for me, folks.
And on that note, we will move into a little more positive segment, which is our Celebrities and Causes segment. This week, we found a PSA in which Zac Efron, Vanessa Hudgens, Dakota Fanning, and several other young actors, including Kristen Bell, actors and actresses, got together to do a PSA for Stand Up to Cancer. The goal of the PSA was to educate people on the fact that, youth cancer is a large issue. And so if we can roll to that PSA, that would be great.
Odds of becoming an astronaut, 1 in 13,200,000. Odds of being struck by lightning, 1 in 576,000. Odds of dating a supermodel, 1 in 88,000. Odds of bowling a perfect game, 1 in 11,500. Odds of being trapped in an elevator, 1 in 24,528. Odds of catching a ball at a major league game, 1 in 563. Odds of an injury from shaving, 1 in 6,585. Odds of tripping while texting, 1 in 10. Odds of getting cancer in your lifetime, 1 in 2 men, 1 in 3 women.
It's up to us.
To change the odds for our generation.
For the ones we love.
For our future.
If you don't like the odds, stand up. Stand up to cancer.
Is that Dakota Fanning?
That was Dakota Fanning.
Wow. I saw her in like War of the Worlds or something.
How long ago was that?
6 years ago or something?
Yeah, she's like 17 or 18 now.
I figured she'd be like Lisa Simpson and stay a kid forever.
No. I'm sorry to ruin that illusion for you.
Oh, it's not ruining anything.
Coming back to the PSA, Stand Up to Cancer is an excellent organization. They focus on empowering not only people who have cancer and to sort of clarify, youth cancer is actually a huge problem because of immune issues, as well as just because it's a tough time to be a teenager and to get cancer. I know that I work with an organization where it's isolating, it's tough to go to school, people don't understand what's going on. And so it's nice to see that youth stars like Zac Efron and Vanessa Hudgens, for example, High School Musical, they're recognizable to the demographic that I think this is meant to entice. And so it's just nice to see that people will take their time to do stuff like this. And I know Zac Efron has done stuff like this before. Yeah,
but after watching this PSA, I don't know exactly, it's a raising awareness campaign.
Yeah.
And of course, if nothing else, teenagers are very good about raising awareness about stuff because they're always on Facebook. But I wouldn't be sure of what I'm supposed to do, and I certainly don't know if I would go to standuptocancer.org to check things out. I mean, do you think the presence of Zac Efron, Vanessa Hudgens, this is going to do something to get teenagers to go to this website?
What I would hope the PSA would have done instead at the end is maybe tell whoever's watching it, whether their audience, I'm not sure if their audience is actually supposed to be that age demographic or perhaps our age demographic in terms of what we should do. Should we donate? Should we get involved? But I wish it had sort of said, well, you know, find out about your odds, because I think what they're trying to do is focus on, like, I know that cervical cancer is something that hits young women. So that's what they're trying to target, for example. I don't know if you've seen those ads on TV, but it's a huge issue, cervical cancer for women like 18 to 26. Then I wish they would have then pointed you to the website to find out more about going and getting tested or something else. So I'm not sure if the organization's focused on research, but I know they have done a lot to empower young people who have cancer in terms of just support and other things, which is actually a critical part of recovery. A lot of people, and this is with any disease, a lot of people when they have that emotional support, whether it's, you know, a friend on the internet or their family, are able to survive cancer.
Yeah, and another thing about Stand Up to Cancer is they're kind of, they cover the whole scope. So it's not just cancer research, but it's also healthy eating, which we'll get to in a little bit, how to prevent cancer, support groups for people. So they're not just focused on one area. As most, and to be fair, most cancer groups in the American Cancer Society and some of those others are very helpful. But I know we talked about the Susan G. Komen Foundation a few weeks ago, and I think some other organizations are much more research focused than they are on the entire, and reaching out to the entire base that they have. So going after teenagers as a way to raise awareness for cancer is a bit of a new route, and well, hopefully a successful one. They've got that big fundraising special, September 10th. It's going to be aired across all the major networks, so that hasn't been done since the Haiti telethon, so that'll be star-studded as well, so I'm sure that'll raise some eyebrows in a good way.
I think we found an instance of celebrities actually doing some good, and so, you know, I'll admit I did watch 17 again with Zac Efron, and I'm a fan, but, you know, I do appreciate the fact that these young stars took their time to really help this issue grow.
Well, to be fair, they're each in like 5 seconds of the video, you know?
Well, still.
And that's to take it, I'm sure they care a lot, and I'm sure they're great people, but, you know, Vanessa Hudgens to show up and Dakota Fanning say, you know, do your part, I don't know.
Well, I think it's a positive thing.
No, I agree, it's a positive thing.
Unlike our Cause Wash segment this week.
Cause Wash.
Cause Wash. We still need our graphic so that we can roll into our Cause Wash.
I'll draw one.
Okay. So this week we're going to discuss, much like in our first episode where we highlighted the Susan G. Komen Foundation and their partnership with Kentucky Fried Chicken and the Pink Bucket, we're in a similar situation this week with McDonald's and the Shrek Happy Meal. We're all familiar with Shrek, the movies, and the appeal that these movies have had with children. And McDonald's has decided to capitalize off of this and make this a healthy eating campaign. Abroad, the healthy eating campaign has been turned into a fun game that your child can go explore healthy eating options. But once again, we take issue with the fact that it's McDonald's. And looking at the food, healthy eating options are not exactly known for McDonald's. I mean, going back to Super Size Me, I cannot get that movie out of my head. You know, McDonald's food is not nutritious, and I know a lot of fast food joints have tried to launch, you know, the apple slices and Happy Meals or milk or juice as part of the option, so that's not just like soda and fries. But, you know, is this really a good...
Well, look, to be fair, they do have apple pie, and there's fruit in that. So, look, you can't go all bad. You know, the Shrek Happy Meal promotion ended about 2 months ago, or else I would have picked one up. I think now it's, you know, Twilight or something, and I didn't want to even give them $3.
Which Twilight's about abstinence, basically, so maybe that would be a more...
Well, we'll cover that in another episode. I don't know how you feel about that. So anyway, what I wanted to do, there is no official website for the Shrek Happy Meal in the U.S. So I went online, I did a little digging, and there's a game that you can play in Europe, and you can say, I'm in Israel or Romania. I chose the UK, so it would give it to me in English. And they have a little bit of a game here, the Shrek Game. I don't know if you can show this. All right, I'm just going to play this for about a minute and see how healthy I am afterwards. Okay, so one player, I don't want to take too long, so one player, enter my, oh wow, so I get 4 different, I'm going to choose the Shrek.
Are those Chicken McNuggets? I can't even,
no they're not.
Okay.
This is the donkey character, this is, I haven't seen them, okay. So now I'm the Shrek character, let's scroll down here. Shrek 3D's in theaters. Let me turn on the volume here. Oops, no, we can't do that.
Yeah.
Or else it's going to play over. Okay, so here we go. Shrek has signed a contract and Rumpel has taken over his world. When you finish all the... Okay, shut up. I don't care about this. Maybe they didn't do the healthy eating campaign in Europe. Europe, it doesn't need to...
Okay, I just see a witch and I'm not seeing anything
No, here we go.
healthy food related.
Well,
Okay.
no, because I think maybe the Shrek Happy Meal thing was only healthy eating focused in the U.S.
Okay.
And in Europe, they're all eating healthy anyway. And they oh, look at that. I can't see a child being amused by this anymore. So let's just get back to us. Because this is... who's playing this game? I think the point is also a big feature of Shrek is that it's candy and gingerbread men and stuff. Like, I don't understand what the connection... I mean, he's big and fat. The character itself is big and fat and ugly. It's supposed to be like loving your inner beauty. It's like encouraging fat kids to be happy with who they are.
Well, the problem...
Which isn't bad. I shouldn't...
Well, I don't think the problem is necessarily that. I think the problem is that, you know, I remember when I was younger, getting a Happy Meal was like a treat that didn't happen that often. And so whether or not the food, you know, was healthy at that time or whatever, it was a treat. It happened every once in a while. This type of campaign makes it seem like, well, the Happy Meal is a healthy eating option. So it's okay to go to McDonald's a couple times a week and, you know, buy your kid a Happy Meal. And the food is just, it's not healthy food.
And if you elect, I think, they'll still give you the nuggets or the cheeseburger, but they'll replace the fries with an apple or something. If you're a kid going to if I was a kid and my mom was taking me to McDonald's and she said, why don't we replace your fries with an apple, I may have set the car on fire. Like, I may have done something drastic. I would have been very, very angry. Because the point, like, in your mind, you know going to McDonald's is not about that.
I think that we don't approach health from a holistic perspective. And that's sort of the starting point, is we don't look at health as just, you know, we think of, you know, the healthcare debate, for example, was really surrounding, you know, access to doctors and medical care. And it wasn't starting back with healthy eating choices and sort of how you're raised, and no matter how you're raised, whether it's, you know, your parents or guardians or however, you know, you're brought up, that it starts very early. It starts with the food that you're exposed to, being taught how to prepare your own food, you know, eating healthy, even if you can't afford to eat. You know, I remember in law school I got in a debate with someone who was like, oh, I would never eat genetically modified foods. And I'm like, yeah, you're really wealthy. Like, you've never been in a position where you've been forced to go to the grocery store with like $5, $10 and just have to make it work for a week for your family. So I think it starts with this holistic approach where, you know, eating as healthy as possible, depending on what your budget is. But I think that the other problem is that we are now being exposed to advertising in mediums that we've never been exposed to before. And we're exposed to the proliferation of the availability of fast food and other things. I mean, I remember when, you know, there's always been McDonald's everywhere, but like, you go to we drive down the street right here, you know, in Santa Monica, and we're going to come across a bunch of fast food places. And we're in Santa Monica, which is sort of a...
Yeah, we're in a
hippie-ish, you know, organic, like, little haven of LA, but we're still going to see those things.
Yeah, there's real food daily, but then there's, I mean, just around here in walking distance, there's a Jack in the Box, McDonald's, Arby's. You know, I think when it comes to childhood obesity, the big problem, and I can speak also from my experience as a child, and it's even worse today, is that there are the parents, and then there's the advertising on TV, which is even more pervasive than it was when I was a child, and it is all candy and chocolate and fast food. There's no escaping it. And when you're a kid, you don't think about this. Like, parents think, oh, they know it's bad for them. They just see it on TV. You don't. As a kid, every weekend I was going to walk to, you know, every weekend me and my friends walked to Carl's Jr. And it was like I was 12 or 13 before my parents said, you know, maybe you shouldn't do that. It's not like the best thing for you. But I think the advertising is so pervasive that it's going to take a concerted effort, like the kind of stuff that Jamie Oliver is trying to get parents to do. It's not enough to just say, that stuff's really bad for you. It's just too much. And now, you know, we're adults and we can see past the advertising for the most part, although I still buy the Dos Equis because the cool guy on the TV told me to. It's hard to get away from it.
You're drawn in by those commercials.
He's a very cool guy, and I want to drink the beer that he drinks.
He's the most interesting man in the world or something.
Yes.
But I think there's a larger problem, which is that, you know, as a child of the 80s, there was sort of an awareness. Like, I was taught healthy food choices, and even in the early 90s when we saw this sort of like health awakening where, the bottled water appeared and like healthy choices and like exercising and things sort of came on the rise as sort of a public, a part of our public life, these healthy living lifestyles, gyms opening up all over the place. While at the same time, we stopped looking at schools and what they're feeding children. And we do have a large poverty problem in this country, and as I said before, many children rely on schools to give them their 2 meals a day. And the idea was, well, these children are not getting a square meal anywhere else, so we're going to have to provide it. Well, the meal's no longer square. It's not appropriate nutrition, it's not following nutrition guidelines, and I know that in watching different documentary films and reading different studies, the agreements that school districts have with different distributors, I mean, it's just like they're just feeding children crap. It's what's affordable and it's what they get, certain options for, and it doesn't really look at the children and what they need to be ingesting to be healthy. It's looking at what's cheapest and what the school district might be forced to buy due to budgetary concerns.
Exactly. I mean, there was a story a few months ago that schools were serving chicken that even KFC would not buy. So the Double Down sandwich that we featured a month ago is better quality chicken than what's in what we're feeding children all across America. Here's another thing, and here's what I'm very cynical about. Let's say we were successful and we got rid of all vending machines and school lunches were apples and carrots. Would kids say, screw this, I got money, my parents gave me, I'm going to go off campus and go to McDonald's instead? Like, are we too late? I think we're too late.
Well, I remember when I was little, I was one of those children with the most boring lunch. And that was for a variety of reasons. My family had to eat healthy for a variety of different reasons due to my dad's health. And, I had the very boring lunch. And other kids like me would go and there'd be like a trading system going on where like the kids with like the better stuff would let you try to trade around and get things. I think there's always been a desire to get like a treat or a snack. But there's that happening where you're eating mostly healthy food and then going to school maybe getting like I remember Squeeze-Its. I wasn't allowed to have Squeeze-Its. It was not allowable, and my mom wouldn't buy them. There's going from that and that happening on the playground to at lunchtime to they're just ingesting crap. I don't know how to better way to say it. Like I see children eating crap. Even with Starbucks, like I go to Starbucks and like I'll get a tea or something. Why is a 3-year-old drinking a Frappuccino? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. They're loaded with calories, there's sugar. 3-year-olds are already hyper enough, why? I think that there's like a generational gap in parenting maybe, or in some parenting of like, they didn't take what, their parents taught them about healthy eating, and now we have this like 10-year gap of children that have no idea and have not been taught how to make healthy choices.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty amazing. And I mean, this, again, I tend to go on tangents, but Starbucks is brilliant because everyone's like, okay, we're all making a bunch of money, Coffee Bean's making a bunch of money, Diedrich's, we're selling coffee. And then Starbucks took Coffee Bean's idea, took it to the next level, like, well, why don't we just sell a bunch of milkshakes as well and call it coffee and people will buy it? I mean, I don't know, every company seems to be able to wash their way out of this. Starbucks says, we took out all the high fructose corn syrup out of our treats. They did. They're still full of calories and the refined carbohydrates and stuff like that. They're still bad for you. They're probably better for you than a Big Mac and fries. But we have a major problem. I think just beyond school lunches, I think it's a bigger problem than the most of the food that we have in this country, most of the food that supermarkets stock around families. I mean, we hear about these food deserts all the time that we're getting close to a majority of Americans. I know it's a small percentage live in food deserts right now, but the majority of Americans are faced with food choices that aren't great. I mean, I can't, who can go to Whole Foods all the time? And even some of their stuff is crap because it sells better. I'm depressed.
No, it's, it's affordability. I mean, that's really what it is. In grocery stores in certain areas where they are low-income areas, if you go in there, you're going to notice a difference between what's offered in that grocery store versus what's offered in another grocery store. And it's ridiculous when, if you try to just eat healthy and you're going to buy groceries, you want to go buy fruits and vegetables, it is ridiculous. You could walk out with hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of a grocery bill just buying like vegetables and healthy things and organic things, whereas the bag of chips is like $1.15. The things that go on special are always the things that are so bad for you. And so it's just unfortunate that not only do we have an education crisis in teaching children about healthy food choices, but we have a consumer system where they know that by putting things on, cheap specials, people are going to buy them, and so we're just feeding the crisis from a consumer perspective as well.
You ever go into a supermarket and then there's the bread aisle and then there's like the good bread that comes not pre-sliced and it's whole grain bread, and that's in like the specialty aisle. You go in the bread aisle and it's like Wonder Bread front and center. What's up with that?
I don't know, but I honestly don't think, though, that it's just Wonder Bread. I mean, Wonder Bread has existed for a very long time.
Yes.
It's the Wonder Bread slap with, tons of mayonnaise and all this crap and the chips and the soda. There's like, you just pile you go from the basic sandwich. A sandwich used to be somewhat healthy. You know what I mean? It used to be like, here's your sandwich, here's your PB&J for your kid. And we've gone away from like, here's a PB&J and an apple to here's a PB&J and all these chips and all this soda, and we're going to go by McDonald's tonight and get dinner.
I don't know, the J's not very good for you. Full of sugar and stuff. I mean, it's easy to get depressed because like, what can you eat sometimes? But honestly, it's not that hard to go, people also don't have time to cook. They're taking 2 or 3 jobs. I mean, all these causes kind of come together. The economy and healthcare, the focus on, we're going to see doctors instead of learning how to be healthy in the first place. We don't have enough money, so we have to go to KFC, and we certainly don't have time to buy healthy stuff to cook. If we do buy something to cook at home, it's the Kraft mac and cheese, which is delicious. But you shouldn't eat it all the time. I mean, I don't even know. I don't know. This is one of those things that I'm not optimistic on, because it seems like this trend is going down, and we're going to be in the land of the spaceships in WALL-E soon. You know those guys in WALL-E?
No.
You didn't see the movie?
No, I didn't.
They're all fat and they can't get up.
I did not see that, but I would like to highlight.
Okay.
I'd like to highlight a statistic that I found especially alarming. The annual College of Cardiology research report that was released in March, and excuse me for reading this, but children who eat school lunches are 60% more likely to be overweight or obese than children who bring lunches from home. And I just think this is a very unfortunate statistic, because you know that the children that are eating school lunches in many cases, there's kids that go to school that they don't have any electricity, like they might not have had proper, sanitation in their home or had a bath or anything, and like that's what they get to eat all day. Like that's it. And it's that choice or nothing. And, families that can afford to send their kids to school with the lunch, who knows what's in that lunch because of the choices at the supermarket. And so we've created this society. It used to be, I even feel like 15, 20 years ago, you could somewhat afford a decent lunch for your child to send them to school with it. And even the school lunch programs used to be focused more so on healthy eating. And today you're just, it's more of like if you're upper middle class, your kid gets a nice lunch. I think that's unfortunate to like put so many people in America in a position where it's the school lunch or nothing, or it's crappy food you're sending your kids with or nothing. And so part of it, I think, is that some of it has to be parenting. I mean, I think that's part of it. But the other part of it is that I think it's affordability.
Yeah, I mean, did you see the Jamie Oliver part of his TED Talk? He showed a video where he went to a school and he held up like an eggplant and a tomato, and kids couldn't say what it was.
Yeah, I saw that.
I mean, maybe things have changed even more since I was a kid, because I didn't like eggplant or broccoli or things when I was a kid, but I knew what they were. I mean, did he gather all the stupid kids in one room to make a point? I don't think so.
No, I don't think that was the case. You're just not exposed to it. I mean, and I know that there are kid-friendly vegetables and fruits, and then there's the non-kid-friendly ones. Like, I think Brussels sprouts, that's like the infamous one that no kid wants to eat.
I still won't eat that.
But I mean, I think some things are going to acquire taste over time. Kids are kids. But, other things like apples and grapes and things, and cucumbers and things that aren't as like scary looking, kids should know what those are, and they should, be getting those. Pick up the phone.
Pick up the phone. Okay.
This is kind of exciting.
I know. Wow, this is crazy. Do I speakerphone? Where's the speakerphone button? You can just come in and help me, because I can't.
Hello?
Hello? I'll just...
Hello?
Hey!
Hi, Christina. I'm glad you were finally able to join us.
Oh, my God.
I'm glad to finally be able to join you, too.
This is exciting. Well, I hope the audience can hear you okay, and I'm sorry we weren't able to patch you in a little bit sooner. So, obviously, our time's a little bit limited now, but we do have a few questions for you. The first one, and what we were trying to ask about before, is the Let's Move campaign, the Michelle Obama campaign, and we were just talking about Jamie Oliver as well. Do you think we're still in the downward trend, or are these campaigns, are we starting to get to the solution to the problem?
Oh, do you want the good news or the bad news?
Start with the good news.
Okay, the good news is that all of these things, Jamie Oliver, Let's Move, everybody who's talking about childhood obesity is bringing attention to this incredibly severe problem. The bad news is all anybody's doing is talking about it. Nobody's really taking some serious action to create systemic change in our schools, in society, in the relationship that kids have with vegetables. You know, everything has become an instant gratification type society where, you know, we want what we want and we want it now, and the whole society seems to be like petulant 5-year-olds.
So what do you think needs to be done? If you think it's just talk right now, how do we take it from talk to action?
I think that it requires all of the nonprofits who are out there doing lots of talking, which they are, to be in the trenches, in the classrooms, saving kids one broccoli spear at a time, if you will. You know, in there talking to them. When you're with kids, I do a lot of this. When I'm in the schools with kids, they will try anything. Radicchio, Belgian endive, infamous Brussels sprouts, but because we involve them and we get them excited about food. And literally, they're starving for something fresh.
So you go into a school and you put food in front of the kids and they just eat it? Is there there's no different strategy? They don't say, I want a Big Mac, they'll just eat it?
Well, we have a big, we have a 6-part program that we do in schools, and we go in and we start with a tasting. You know, and we have a farm produce company that brings us all kinds of exotic things and common things. And you're right that you can hold up a cauliflower today and most kids can't tell you what it is. So, but after we start talking about it, and even little 5-year-old children know, when I stand in front of a classroom and I say, what happens if you eat at McDonald's every day? They all make a great big hand motion as though they were big and fat, and they puff their cheeks out and go like this. So they know, and they only know what we condition them and what advertising conditions them to want. But once they taste fresh food, my experience has been, across the board, 100%, they'll at least try it.
So, well, I'd say that is pretty good news because...
That's great news.
Well, yeah, I would have thought that it's too late and just kids were not interested in, one, being educated, and two, actually trying some of these new things. But you think it's easier done than the rest of us would think?
I do think it's easier done. My experience has shown me that it's very easy to do. It depends on how you go in there with kids. You know, we kind of go in, my sort of posse, and we go in and it's a big adventure. We have a magician who turns unhealthy food into healthy food, and we have a band who sings about fruits and veggies. So the kids are being entertained in the process. And I know when I was growing up, my mother used to say that she needed a brass band to get us to eat dinner. And I think that might be true. You know, our kids are so stimulated, and there's video games and apps and whatever. So I think that the more we go in and make food something of an adventure for them, the more likely we are that they're not going to turn their nose up and they're not going to walk away. In Baltimore School District, they tried out something called No Thank You Bites, and they set souffle cups along the lunch counter. And if you tried it and you didn't like it, all you could say was no thank you. You couldn't, you know, ew, yuck, nasty, whatever. And if you just tried it, you got a star by your name. And at the end of the month, we had a constellation party. And all the kids who had tried the food came into the cafeteria and talked about why they liked zucchini, why they didn't like chard, and their input impacted the school lunch menus.
So,
it was an amazing program that they did there. And they went from a 15% participation rate to an 85% participation rate in a year.
So now the big question, then, the troubling question.
Yeah.
We've got, you said we can get kids into this. We have to do more than just talk. How do we make this more than just and all credit to what the First Lady's doing, but how do we make this a presidential issue, a national issue, and getting people to talk about it more than we're talking about, a mosque at Ground Zero?
Which we shouldn't even be talking about. But anyway, I think that I don't think that the news can get much worse. So I'm not sure what it's going to take to spur us into real action. My nonprofit is working on getting with Mrs. Obama to change this from talk to action, to gardens in schools, subsidies even for the companies that provide school lunches so that they provide healthier school lunches. They don't really care what they feed our kids as long as they're making money. So for us, it's about going into the schools and creating the change from the ground up. In America, change never seems to come from the top down. It always seems to start with grassroots, angry parents, concerned parents who get together and make the change. And this isn't going to be any different than that.
I looked at your program, and I think it's a wonderful way to get kids so excited about fruits and veggies. I've always been a fan, but I know that kids have problem eating that stuff. What's the cost of implementing such a program at the school district level? That's one of the concerns that I know that some school districts would have, or maybe parent groups that want to implement something like this at their own schools.
I know for us, our 6-part program for our nonprofit costs $7,500 a school. And what we do is provide that funding. All the money that we raise goes into creating these programs so that the schools don't have to pay for the equipment, the teacher, the food. We don't want it to cost them anything. We want them to just welcome us in and say, we're here. We want to go in there, give children information, because in my view, they are going to start the next revolution. Kids are going to be the ones who say, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to eat this anymore. Because we're being tricked day to day to day. You've got cereal companies saying that their cereal contains 75% less sugar, which is true, but they replace the sugar with high fructose corn syrup. You've got Lucky Charms claiming to be healthy because they have a check mark that says they have whole grain. So I think parents are confused. Consumers are confused. So by going in and creating not a confrontational atmosphere, but by changing the relationship kids have with food, then they can make better choices based on what they know and have experienced. So our job as a nonprofit is we get those programs funded. In our work, it doesn't cost the schools anything.
Oh, great.
Well, I'm sorry to cut you short, but we do have to get going. So I'm sorry, we wish we could have talked to you a little bit longer. The website is ChristinaCooks.com. She's got some tips on there. She's got best-selling cookbooks on there, so I'd encourage you to check out ChristinaCooks.com. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well,
all right.
I'm glad to hear some positive news, and I'm glad to hear that it's not that expensive to get this program into the schools. So
I was a doubter, now I'm a believer.
Yes.
And that took 15 minutes, and I'm going to go home and eat my veggies, I guess.
Good. Glad to hear it. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us for the episode 5 of This Week in Cause. Thanks to Christina Pirello. Although she's only able to join us for a short period of time, I think that she stands the testament to the fact that you can make change at the ground level, and we can get kids excited about healthy eating choices. Stay tuned for This Week in Mad Men. If you saw last night's episode, some great stuff between Pete and Peggy. And so I'm Christina Gagne, and this is my co-host Jonathan Harris. And thank you for joining us in This Week in Cause. Do well by doing good. Have a good night.